And we are live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Holy Crap, the Vlogcast. Vlogcast that comes from a skeptical point of view to answer some of the questions of why. This Vlogcast started as a combination of spite and the Streisand effect, when some people on Facebook that like to post stuff on there, people I knew back from high school, they were playing with Facebook the way that they wanted to, which was to post whatever it was that they wanted to that made them feel good. And my way of playing with Facebook was to correct them when they were wrong, which was often, which they did not like. Part of this is also to follow through with the old adage that sometimes the journey is more important than the destination. I'm known to Shujin Tribble all over the place. You can find me under Facebook and G+, and everything under that. I was born to a Roman Catholic family in Brooklyn, New York, raised on Long Island. I currently reside outside of Buffalo, New York, and I'm an unabashed atheist. Tonight is a very special episode. We have an unusual lineup for you guys tonight, and I hope that you're going to enjoy yourselves. Let me start off with an unusual starting off. Blast from the past, one of our first co-hosts. Good evening, Witchy Bunny.
Good evening, Shujin. Hello, everyone. My name is Witchie. I was born in Philadelphia, currently living in the cold white north, that is Connecticut. Born and raised a Jehovah's Witness, now currently kind of settling at agnostic, and looking to go from there.
Moving to north of the border, over into Ontario, Canada. Good morning, Heretic Woman.
Good morning. I'm over here in Ontario, Canada, which I think I'm actually slightly warmer than Witchy right now.
I think you are, actually.
I am. It gets weird that way sometimes. I grew up in the United Church of Canada, which is pretty liberal as far as churches go. But as we all do stupid things as teenagers, my stupid teenager trick was to join a Calvinist sect. I don't recommend it. They're not exactly the most fun people. But I got better, and I have now been an atheist for going on 27 years. And I spend time on my own shows and bothering religious fanatics online wherever I find them.
Moving into the Midwest of the U.S. Good morning, Dridgit.
Good morning. My name is Dridgit Fitch. I was born and raised in the South. I'm currently living in the Midwest. My family and I grew up Church of Christ and put the fun in the mental and fundamentalist. I am now a secular humanist and an unabashed atheist and a reluctant activist.
So, as you guys might be noticing on the show right now, we do have 3 additional co-hosts, which is an unusual amount, plus this is a very august lineup for us. Coming from us to you at this point, going down to Texas way, good morning, Ms. Tracie Harris.
Oh, hey. Actually, for me, it's evening. But, yeah, my name's Tracie Harris. I'm probably best known for my work on the Atheist Experience, and I guess it's a podcast now that comes out of Austin, Texas. I was raised in Orlando, Florida. My religious upbringing was, I had a dad who wasn't really actively religious, but who believed and would argue the Bible with just about anybody. And I had a mother who was raised Italian Catholic, extremely superstitious, and she converted to Church of Christ fundamentalism before I was born, I think. And so I was raised in the Church of Christ, and that was extremely fundamentalist, probably not quite as rough as Dridgit had it, but still pretty fundamentalist compared to how most Christians are raised in the U.S. So I ended up finally getting my way out of that church, spent about 10 years rethinking everything I'd been taught until I finally gave up belief in God. So I gave up religion, and it took me about 10 years to get over belief in God, even after I ditched religion. So there was that. And then I was already in Austin when I became an atheist, and ended up getting connected with the atheist community of Austin and ultimately on their outreach program, the Atheist Experience.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Joining us from the opposite side of pretty much everybody at this point, good morning, or actually good afternoon, Ms. Shelley Segal.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. Nice to be here from sunny Melbourne.
Rub it in.
Well, considering the temperatures of what we're talking about before, don't rub it too much.
So I'm a singer-songwriter and a musician, and I was brought up in a Jewish tradition. My parents would probably identify as traditional Jews, and we went to an Orthodox synagogue despite living a more reform or liberal type of level of observance at home. So I had a mix of different levels of religiosity. And I went to Jewish school, and I was part of a Jewish Zionist youth group called Habonim, and worked on camps and taught other kids about Judaism and Israel, and it was a really big part of my life. I learned to play music at Jewish weddings and functions, and when I was 18, 19, I started questioning everything, and now I identify as an atheist and a free thinker and a secularist and a humanist. And it's been an amazing journey of getting to rediscover the world and understand the value of critical thinking and try and apply that to my life now and the way I approach my ethics and philosophy.
Excellent. And rounding out the panel tonight, welcome, Ms. Teresa MacBain.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Sorry about my dogs. My son walked in and the dogs went crazy.
No worries.
They're very good at barking when somebody comes up, and then they run and hide because they're afraid. But I grew up in the South, in Alabama, which is where I live now. My dad was, like Bridget's, extremely fundamentalist pastor, and I followed his footsteps and became a pastor myself, and served a long time, and eventually, through a long process, a difficult process, moved away slowly, inch by inch, from my faith to where almost 4 years ago, well, it was more than 4 years ago, that I decided I was an agnostic, and then slipped on down into deciding that I was an atheist. And it was almost 4 years ago when I came out publicly on a stage in front of lots of people. That was not the smartest thing in the world, possibly, but hey, I'm glad it happened, and life is a lot different now. So, and I know all you guys, and that is so much fun. And the guys in the Q&A over there are laughing at my dogs, so that's really cool.
No worries at all. And before we even get started with everything, just a couple of quick pieces of information. If you are watching live, by all means, please take advantage of the question and answer system. I may not be able to get to all of the stuff that's in there because, we leave it open for all of the social stuff as well as the Qs. So if I suddenly disappear stuff, please forgive me. It's just to try and keep the questions in there a little bit more than the social stuff. So I'll make sure that we acknowledge everything. Co-hosts from the show, of course. Joseph, thank you very much. Chris, see you over there. I do believe that I saw, yep, there he is on Remote Tech. Do see you guys over there. Thank you very much. Katie, good to have you watching and listening. And, of course, Beth, thank you very kindly. Also, if you are watching and you are not part of the Q&A, by all means, feel free to send a tweet to us while we're doing this, and send that to @HolyCrapTV. And I've got my phone up and running. I've got a Twitter system all running on the screen, so we'll be able to get to you guys as we go along. For the entire panel, thank all of you. As I said before we got started with the show, I wanted to make sure that everybody understood this is a very, very unusual lineup that we've got, and I am very, very privileged to be able to have this, especially considering that we're currently breaking the 100 episode barrier tonight, which, yes, it's just a number, but it's a pretty good number right here. We got a couple of others that are going to be coming up that are a little bit more important in my own head, but 100 is a good number to start off with. So thank you all for being part of this.
Thank you.
So,
and congratulations.
I appreciate that greatly. So I'll make reference to the breaking this barrier a little bit later in a different episode coming up, but before we get to that even, let me get everything started over here. With apologies to Noah, Heath, and Lucinda from The Scathing Atheist, with 5 minutes on the clock, your 5-minute freestyle starts right now. Now, I did say that I was going to be repeating myself, and I'm going to try very hard not to during the episode. Nerves happen, and in a situation like this, I'm expecting I'm going to make a couple of flubs here and there, but this opening is going to be a repeat. And I wanted to do this one specifically for this group because I think it's kind of important. Some weeks ago, I ended up talking about a new idea that had come through my head while I was just driving for my job. I mean, it's the kind of thing that happens. My brain starts floating around and, well, things start coming into my head. And I had a thought come in that I had not considered before, and to the best of my knowledge, nobody else had actually passed on this one before either. You go talking about the Bible for Christianity, and of course everything stems from Genesis, right from the beginning. And, you know, we're pretty familiar with Genesis in and of itself. But there's a piece of it that I don't think people had really taken into account. And that was this particular piece. According to the story, of course, the tree of knowledge is there right in the middle of everything, plain as day, and we pretty well know the story. Eve gets tempted by the serpent, who says, you know, this is good for you. Don't listen to what the big guy said. And she goes ahead, she takes a bite, she gives it to Adam. God comes down, where are you? Whatever you'd think you'd know, and, well, kicks them all out. All right, that's the short version. But there's a piece about this that I don't think that people had really taken into account. Eve, yes, was talked to by the serpent, or whatever it was supposed to have been, the lack of a voice box notwithstanding. But the serpent basically said, look, God said that you're going to die from this? No, this has got everything that you want for nourishment, and it's got all the knowledge that he doesn't want you to have. Now, pause for a second. This little snapshot, this moment right here, I went and reread the particular verses and passages. This tree was not any much different in overall appearance from the other stuff that was in the garden. It had the same looking fruit as everything else in the garden. So what happens is, Eve looks it over and made a decision. She decided right there and then that she was going to find out for herself. In that moment, in this story, Eve has suddenly become the first scientist, the first researcher, the first skeptic. She was the one that actually said, you know what, God says that I'm going to die if I have this, and this looks exactly the same as the other stuff that's not going to kill me. Plus, you're saying that this is going to give me something more. Let me find out for myself. She went ahead and she made a decision. She wanted to find out for herself. She was a skeptic. And it was under our noses all the time. But it gets better. Because not only did she go ahead and find out for herself, she was suddenly imbued, according to the story, with the knowledge of good and evil. She had the knowledge to decide for herself at that point what to do with this newfound knowledge. She decided the good thing to do, the more moral thing to do, was to share that knowledge with the only other sentient human. It was more important to her, it was a better good, to disobey God's order, don't eat, and to share it, than to risk the punishment. This has been under our noses this entire time. Even as a kid growing up as a Catholic, I had heard these stories, and what ended up happening? Nobody ever explained it to me this way. I had never heard of it this way before. And I've listened to a lot of podcasts, a lot of skeptics. Never had I had this thrown at me this way. And this is something that just came up into my head while I was driving, and suddenly things fell into place. How did we not ever see this? How have we never noticed this as skeptics ourselves? More importantly, if I'm right on this, and pretty sure that I am, what would be stopping us from using this to explain to people, especially to women, the females that might be questioning, you're not crazy, and you're sure as hell not out there on the fringe. You're right where your religion has said that you should be. And guess what? You can make the decision for yourself too. This is episode number 100. As I mentioned, you see what we did there? Yes, the letter C was important because, well, you know, it's kind of cute that way. Before we get into the full-on of everything at this point, as usual, let me just check in. Heretic woman, what is the latest information that we have for Rafe Badawi?
Nothing new, sadly. He is still in jail.
And at this point, his sister is not?
That is correct, thankfully.
So there's at least that much. As of the recording of this show, it has now been 3 years, 7 months, 14 days since Rafe Badawi was unjustly incarcerated for thought crime at the Saudi Arabian government, and we're still hoping for your release, or minimally, a pardon, minimally. We can hope. So tonight we're going to be talking with a panel that is a complete XX group, except for yours truly, of course, because it's my show. I'm vain that way. Tough. And we're going to be talking about the landscape for the skeptical community, the atheist community, the freethinker community, because as we've heard on many an occasion, the numbers tend to be skewed. They are very male-heavy. I don't know what the actual numbers are, but let's call it 70-30, 60-40. What I want to find out is from the ladies, and please forgive me for calling you guys ladies, I want to find out, why do we think that it is that way? Why does it seem to be skewed this way? And what does it look like from that side? And what can we do to change that a little bit, to alter the numbers, to bring them a little bit more closer to 50-50 within that plus or minus 3% margin of error that the Pew researchers like to use? So, as I tend to do, I want to try to find out a little bit more from who's got the information and who's been dealing. So, Tracie, I want to start off from you because you arguably have some of the greatest visibility. You go to talks. You have a presence on the TV and podcast shows. You have done a lot, activism-wise, and you've seen and talked to a lot of people. What would you like to insert for the whole thing to begin with, as far as to where the question lies out with all this so far?
I think it's actually kind of a tough question for me to answer because I'm not sure that my experience in the community is representative of most women's experience in the community for a lot of the reasons that you just expressed. I think that a lot of times I'm not subject to for example, speaking at a conference, you're not as likely to be treated like a conference attendee if you're the speaker. So I think that some people may be intimidated or have these displaced feelings of impression or what do you call it, like respect that would be different. People have a tendency to apply different levels of that to strangers if they're in certain positions, as opposed to like a stranger that they meet that's not in that position. I don't know why people do this, but they do. And my experience within the community has been very mild. Like I remember being at one event at one time where somebody asked me afterwards, they were like, did you feel weird being the only female in a room full of like 20 or 30 people at dinner? And then it dawned on me that, oh yeah, I guess I was the only female. It hadn't occurred to me. It occurred to this person that asked me, but it wasn't anything that occurred to me. When I thought back about it, I realized, like, yeah, okay, it was just men, wasn't it? But I don't really notice that. But when I think about what you're asking in terms of why might women have an issue, I have to go for like second and third hand experience, like what people have told me, what the average female atheist has told me about her experiences within the community, and also what I know about other women that I might know socially who are atheists who simply don't involve themselves in the community and have never tried. So on the one hand, I have heard some stories from people that I've sent to meetups. Like people will contact me and say, I'd like to maybe meet with other atheists. I'm not out, or I'm just recently out and I don't have any network. And so I'll look up their area and I'll say, hey, there's a group that is in this town. Is that near you? And they'll be like, yeah, that's maybe 20 minutes away. I'll give it a shot. And more often than I would like, sometimes they come back and say they didn't feel comfortable with the way they were treated by the predominantly male group of atheists when they were there, that they went there to form networks and have some support, but when they showed up, they felt like a piece of meat because every guy there was interested in dating them, and I think part of the reason might be that they're not used to seeing women at their meetups in some areas. And so there's a little bit of an understandable reaction from the men who are thinking like, wow, this is the unicorn of atheism. There's finally a female atheist at our meetup, and she seems cool and she's attractive, and so she's going to get that attention from men who are living in areas where a female atheist is not common, and that's usually where the women who need the most support are going to be coming from. And so there's like this sad dynamic, which, while I may understand it, is unfortunate because if a woman comes to a meetup and she feels like she's being targeted by 20 guys who want to date her, she's not going to feel comfortable to go back. But this is like, I think, area specific or region specific. And the other side of this would be women that I know who are very intelligent, very secure, like self-assured women who are atheists that I am familiar with who have no interest in joining an atheist community. They simply don't see it as necessary. So there's like a couple people that I have in mind immediately who they just simply are like, why? Why do I need that? Because their lives are going super well, and they are super confident, and they have super jobs and super families, and they're just very outgoing, self-assured, confident, educated women who don't really see the need for support because they don't have these any issues with it. That's really the only experiences I have had that might impact this. But then, like I'm saying, I think there would definitely be other people who could speak to this in a more informed way. But those are the sort of external inputs that I've had that seem to be relevant to this question.
Well, I can actually bolster both of that from my local experience. My city is about 250,000. And I'm very active in the local groups, and we do have women that show up to meetups, but it's more often it's me and a bunch of guys, and exactly like you say, half the time I don't even notice it. It's kind of like, oh yeah, there weren't any women there that time. And when they do show up, you're right, there is that, wow, she's smart and she's cute and she's an atheist, all right, kind of thing. And there now I wouldn't say it's like they all want to date her, but oftentimes there is one or two that are like, hey, is she single? And it does happen that way. And then on the flip side of that, I've only started becoming active in the last year and a half or so. Before that, it was, I never even considered what would I need an atheist group for? Because up here in Canada, it's kind of a non-issue, and so I never felt that need to go searching for a group to belong to. It was just kind of, well, I'm an atheist, whoop-de-doo sort of thing. So I can see all of those angles just in my own experience.
Yeah. When it comes to just like being thoughtful, right? I mean, if I was going to, I'm hesitant to give advice to people, but I would say that what I would be cognizant of, just from what I know about the women who have contacted me and the women that I interact with on a daily basis, if you're at a meetup and a woman shows up, don't assume she's there looking to date.
Yeah.
If she says that or she gives those cues, that's, whatever. She can be there to date, but start with the assumption that she's there for support.
Yeah.
and that she's there to make friends and make a network. And if something happens, that's fine, but don't just jump on it assuming like, hey, she wants to date me. And make her feel comfortable as a person just showing up at the meetup and feeling welcome, not feeling pressure that she has to like worry about whether or not she is going to have to reject you at the end of the night, or she doesn't need that pressure. She probably had to work up a lot just to come there. And so be aware that that situation can be that way for her. And when it comes to, the women that are empowered, I mean, I don't even know what to say to that. It's like it's hard to drag them into a community when they feel completely that it's completely unnecessary for them. Those are just really empowered women.
And it's worse up here for that because we have this attitude that, what do we need atheist groups for? Because we don't have the in-your-face religion like you do in America. So it's sort of we're getting more active, I think, because we see all the crap that goes on down there, and we're kind of like, whoa, that's a little close for comfort. So we're getting better, but historically there's been a lot of like, well, we don't really need to organize or be a group or anything. And then add to that, women who are just like, well, I don't need that extra effort or whatnot. And it's, as I say, organizing atheists is herding cats. Organizing Canadian atheists is like herding cats on catnip.
I can hear that. Yeah, there's also a piece about this that I wanted to, I want to kind of get, not the flip side too, but there's another facet of this piece also that I want to get. And Witchie, I want to get you specifically for this one. Because of your history with the Jehovah's Witnesses, you know this one all too well, and we've talked about this before on the show. If you are in the Jehovah's Witnesses and then you try to get out, and I'm very specifically saying try to, it goes badly, and I can only imagine for the women it goes, yeah. So really quickly for everybody because of that.
If you try to get out of Jehovah's Witnesses, in other words, if you aren't very, very careful about how you leave the religion, you get shunned. You get shunned by everyone you might have grown up with, your entire support system. Your family is also supposed to shun you. I mean, I'm talking 100% just shut out of everything. And if you're a woman, especially if you're a woman who's being disfellowshipped, as is a term, for anything like, premarital sex, which is always the woman's fault. The guy can usually be forgiven and let back in. But if the woman gets raped, if she's, premarital sex, if she's been abused for any of these reasons, usually the elders will counsel her to stay and let it go. If she chooses not to do that, she is usually cast out pretty heavily, and women have lost their homes and their entire support system over that. It does not go well, and if you're not very careful about how you try to leave the religion, you usually find yourself completely high and dry. I'm actually really fortunate because my family, when I left, was still completely supportive and still actually is very involved in my life to this day, and that's highly unusual. My family is completely not the norm. They always told me to go out and get a higher education, to look after myself. Completely not the norm in Jehovah's Witnesses. Normally, everything is completely the opposite of that.
Yeah, that's the piece that I wanted to specifically get at, because there's also the maybe you're doing well enough, so you're comfortable, and of course there's the fear aspect of leaving the group. Now, Teresa, that's the one where you're coming in at this point. Like you said at the top, you went ahead and you made your atheism a public thing, which was a huge piece for a lot of people, never mind for yourself. You came out in a very visceral manner with so many people around you, and you could have very easily felt the bottom fall out and a complete loss of everything and everyone around you. And I've heard you talk about this in various interviews before. That reaction that you got for yourself in that moment was for you what?
Oh, it was, I think a lot about that, especially now that this few years have passed, and I hear from so many people at conferences or emails or wherever. People are always reaching out to me, and I hear their stories and how it happened for them. And for me, I mean, I got lucky. It was a 1 in a million opportunity that came up that weekend at the Reason Rally, and I was just desperate, and I took it. And so, like you said, there was a large crowd, and I said what I had to say, and an overwhelming response of just support and tears and love and clapping, and I don't even remember it. It's like a dream sometimes when I think about it. But a good friend of mine, Rich Lyons, made the comment that evening. He said, it's like you stepped out into this very safe cloud, a safe place for you to land, and that's exactly what happened. It was hard. I did go home, and I had lost everything. I didn't know that it was going to be that bad. I had never experienced anything like that. Didn't know anybody who had, and I found out very quickly. And I really think that had it not been for the people that were there who met me and celebrated with me, they immediately started following me online on Facebook and checking in with me all the time, all day long. Are you doing okay? We know what it's like. And I think that made all the difference for me, because, I don't think I had it any harder than anybody else who has come out. It's hard. Hard is hard. Just different person, But I think that was really a huge benefit for me. And Tracie, I remember coming to Austin. Was it October?
Yeah, for the back cruise.
Yeah, it was, I don't know, 5 or 6 months. I was still so, I don't know, I think I was still shell-shocked, probably. But I walked into this place, into Austin, Texas, and I knew a few of the people. I knew Matt and Beth. And maybe that was all I really had ever met and known in person. But immediately, I was with friends. People were my friends on Facebook, or they were there in D.C., and that, I mean, even now, it carries me through every day, because, I know each one of you probably could say you still have bad days. You still have days when everything's falling apart, and you wish that there was a God you could pray to that would make things better. Which, of course, that's not true. You can still hope for it and make life easier, maybe.
Well, in my particular case, I don't know about a God so much as I really wish the doctor were a real thing, because there's one thing in particular I'd love to go back in time to be able to change. And fortunately, but that's a whole other piece for a little bit later. We'll explain it. Bridget, let me pull you in at this point also, because you've got a piece also with the fear side of it all, and this is something that I'm not going to completely elaborate, because this is something that we talked about before the show and before you even officially joined on. You are in an area where you've got concerns, because if your atheism was much more prominent, bad things could happen for you socially, etc., etc., etc. So how much, from what you've seen, from what you've talked with people in general, or women specifically, how much do you think that would hold people back from coming forward and being known?
I know that where I'm at, it absolutely would keep people back. I know of one other female atheist that lives in my area. One. And she's not out either. I've had some problems here back in 2012 with some of the legislation being passed, and had to file complaints with the FFRF, on behalf of my child, because they were trying to pass Lord's Prayer bills and things like that. After that, we've had RFRA foolishness. We've got RFRA 2.0 coming up. We've got a bunch of Senate legislation that I'm trying my best to fight back against here. And the people here are so, I guess, fundamentalist that even when the schools try to do things like have anti-bullying programs, those are shut down immediately because, you know, they want to be able to bash the gays or whatever for religious reasons. And, I mean, it's just a bad environment here all around. And it's to the point now where, because of some of the legislation that's passed, if I happen to be out and working for an organization that's even, you know, far removed, but maybe owned by a Catholic hospital or something like that, they can require statements of faith in order to keep your job. And that is scary. And it's also an at-will state, so they can fire you for any reason or no reason.
And like you were saying once before, with this whole roofer thing, that's just one more excuse to be able to do that and just hold it over your head.
And I guess what really hit it home for me and made me really start fighting back is when I had an attorney up in Indianapolis that was, you know, I've known for several years, tell me after looking over various pieces of legislation, you know, you need to shut up and go back in the closet and just chill for a while until this gets overturned. And it may take years. So I took his advice to heart. He knows what he's talking about. And, you know, so I had been tiptoeing out of the closet and my ass went back.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's where a lot of this stuff is, where I was afraid to have to tread into, because there are so many places where this is exactly the kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And this is why I wanted to specifically close, not exactly close, but to finish rounding this all out so far with Shelley. Because for you, Shelley, in Australia, I've heard from a lot of different podcasts from down that side. There are pockets where religiosity is really high, where the quote-unquote Southerner type personalities are, you know, big. Anti-vaccination groupings in various areas are annoying, but I don't know that I've necessarily heard what kind of social problems might come of being outspoken as an atheist. And you've done a good job of doing for yourself and making it part of your profession and such. How does that work down there for you guys, and how has it worked for you specifically?
Yeah, I think that's a good point to bring up. As you said, there's these pockets of religious communities where it can be a lot more difficult to be openly atheist or to question or challenge the worldview and beliefs of your community. But for myself, I'm very fortunate that I don't face any loss of job opportunities or you know, and my family have been very supportive. And myself, my job as an artist and a musician, you know, you're kind of expected to push boundaries a little bit. So, you know, I do have that room to speak about those issues. There's been interesting times where we've been working with PR and trying to, you know, create opportunities to talk about my atheist music in the press. And, you know, on a very, very small level, certain commercial stations will say, oh, no, we don't want to talk about this because we don't want to polarize our listeners. There was another time when I was performing at the Global Atheist Convention in Melbourne, my city, back in 2012, and my father is the president of a local synagogue in my city, and a lot of press outlets didn't want to solely talk about my experiences as an atheist. They wanted to frame it with, you know, as opposing to my father's views as the president of a synagogue. So I think, you know, there's still, even in a country where, you know, we're quite secular, it's fine to be an atheist in the mainstream culture. One of our recent prime ministers, Julia Gillard, was openly an atheist. So there's definitely a different landscape for people in mainstream culture to be openly atheist and openly challenge religious beliefs. But still, certain press outlets don't want to give a, you know, purely atheist perspective. They had to frame it within the context of my father's beliefs. So that was, you know, interesting. But again, not not nearly as difficult as it is in some states in the mainstream culture that I've experienced in the United States. My phone, my connection cut out a bit earlier, so I'm not sure if anyone mentioned this, but just on the question of participation of females in the community, when I know that such a large percentage of the atheist activist movement and the secular activist movement is made up of people who have come out of their religious communities and therefore see the need to spread these ideas like critical thinking and to spread support groups for people who are having this experience of leaving their communities. But traditionally in those communities, it's the women who are given the task of taking care of the children and taking care of the home, and it may be more difficult for them to find the time to participate in the movement as it grows, or even have the time for themselves to go and seek out that support, because they will be burdened, I guess, traditionally, from my experience with religious communities, that they have more responsibilities at home with the family.
That's a good point. I hadn't really thought about that. Being a single dad, I can certainly will appreciate that particular point. That's
well, and one angle to that I had thought of earlier, because I kind of was pondering the whole why thing earlier, and I got this kind of from my mother, because I've chosen to be child free, but I think a lot of women get this idea stuck in their head that you have to send your kids to church and be religious in order to be a good mother. That if you're not religious and you don't sort of hang on to some of that, you're not going to be able to teach morality, and that's sort of she hasn't come out and said it, but she's implied that because that side of my family is not religious really. We didn't go to church every Sunday until we got old enough to go to Sunday school, and then it was suddenly, you have to go to church every Sunday. And my father was never interested in going to church, but Mother dragged us there every bloody week, and we had no interest terribly, and trying to tease it out of her why she still hangs on to that, and I think that has a lot to do with it, just that idea that you're not being a good mother if you aren't religious.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with that. I actually, when I was first kind of pondering leaving, being a Jehovah's Witness and kind of figuring out, if I was going to be agnostic or just atheist or whatever, I actually had someone flat out tell me, it's like, look, you need religion to teach your kids morality, otherwise they're not going to know right from wrong, and, it's like that whole sense of morality being, springing from religion. And I think I've actually discussed this on the show before with you, Shijin, is that the whole idea of morality springing from religion rather than religion being a way to encode moral expectations that were already there in society. But that's still very much a expectation that, well, if you don't send your kids to church, how would they know right from wrong? So
they just need to go to the garden and eat an apple.
Yes.
So that's a false argument, because as soon as you ate the apple, according to the Bible, everybody knows right from wrong. That was one of the consequences. I mean, the consequence, of course, is death, but that was, if you eat this, you're going to know the knowledge of good and evil. So it's always been a false premise from the very beginning. So there's your sermon for the day. With the women participating in the movement, I'll throw the agree with you ladies, as well as bring it back around to my experience as a pastor. When we had trouble in churches, and there was a lot, if you didn't have a thriving children's ministry, then you didn't have the moms, you didn't have the families. And I see the same thing. It's gotten better in a lot of different places, but if we want to make the movement a safe place for women, we've got to address the issues that we just talked about, which is making a woman feel safe when she comes to a meeting, but we also have to extend it a little bit further. It's more than safety. Supporting a woman who has children means you're not trying, she doesn't want to dump her kids off at a babysitter, or, even if she needs a night out, she would still, a community is a place where she can go and her family can go and her kids are getting that interaction. That's why religion is so good at having families, because they nurture the whole family from the dad down to the baby. And that's what we're human beings. We want that. So a lot of groups like Houston Oasis, they're doing really well. And one of the reasons is because they're doing that for the kids. It's a whole body, a whole person kind of a outreach. And that's, like I said, I've heard numbers and numbers of women say that. And so I don't know that you could say we're mirroring the church in that. I don't think so, because it's two different animals, but I think the same principle applies both ways because it's both community structures.
Well, any community structure, in order to thrive, is going to have to cater to the entire family. It can't just be one aspect. It can't just be just the males or just the females or just the kids, because no society, no community is just one aspect. It's all intertwined. It's all connected, as Carl Sagan has said. So, it's all one. It's all intertwined. And so if you're going to try and bring people together in any type of society or community, you have to take into consideration all of it, not just individual members, and you have to take them into consideration as a whole and how they relate to each other. So,
and that's where religion falls short. And I think all of us, with the exception of Shelley, we experienced religion that did it in the harmful way, which is, it was the whole family, and it was a nurturing of the whole family, but it was a caste system, so that the women especially were, because we were so fundamentalist. I can remember when I got old enough to sing, any woman that sang or did anything, they could never step up onto the level that the podium was on. It always had to be down in the front, because a woman could not usurp authority over a man and stand, taking a 6-8 inch step up. That was going to really hurt a guy. I mean, it would attack his ego so bad, I guess. I don't know. But, so we learn early on where our place is at, and our place is definitely below a man. And you were Jehovah's Witness, so you've probably experienced the I don't know. I mean, women couldn't say anything.
The weird thing about it is that as a woman, we were given specific. All right, so. And I'm going to have to frame this a little bit. With Jehovah's Witnesses, they have ministerial schools where you learn how to conduct Bible studies with people, and they do this in the form of silly little skits. And a woman could not be in a skit with a man. It was always two women, and it was never. I'm serious. It was always two women.
You. I've seen that
face to face. A woman cannot give a Bible study to a man. She can't do it. A woman was never to give a talk, which is their version of sermons, and if a man's present, a woman can't pray. I mean, it's it's very much a men are here and women are here, and it's something that's very ingrained, literally from childhood on, is that it's men, women, and then boys, and then girls. And in some ways it goes men, boys, and then women and girls. And in a lot of ways in the Jehovah's Witness religion, it's like that in a lot of churches, especially fundamentalists.
It was very similar to that in the synagogue that I attended. So we went to an Orthodox synagogue, and women have to sit upstairs if you can't, they have to sit separately from the men. If you can't make it upstairs for some reason, you could sit up the back with a curtain dividing you from the other men. And as a woman, your voice is not allowed to be heard unaccompanied, so women weren't allowed to participate in leading the service. The whole service revolves around reading the Old Testament, and it's an honor to be called up to read from it. And women are just flat out, in Orthodox Judaism, not allowed to read from the Old Testament. And I watch my, my brother and other family members, cousins, celebrate their bar mitzvahs, where they are, become an active member of the community, and they will be called up and read from the Torah. And there's no equivalent for women. And there's this thing called Shaminagia, where certain Orthodox people don't touch the opposite sex. So, my family's rabbi would come to our house and he'll shake my father's hand, he'll shake my brother's hand, but he won't touch me, despite the fact, that we've been friends and known each other for a long time. It's like I'm separate, and I will be treated differently because of my gender, something that I was born with and can't help. There was a prayer that we said in primary school every day, every morning, that call and response between the boys and the girls, where the boys would say, "Dear God, thank you for not making me a woman." And we would say back, "Dear God, thank you for making me what I am." and
Wow.
So I didn't even understand what was so fundamentally wrong and harmful about this, these prayers and these rituals and the way that it all worked, until I had some distance and some time from my religion, that I could say, wow, I don't even want to step in anymore to be segregated by my gender.
Yeah, there's a piece about this that I want to get over into, and Unwindow Tech has actually thrown something over in the Q&A that kind of helps with this. Tech puts over in here, quote, the Old Testament, where it goes, men, boys, farm animals, women. And that's not an exaggeration, unfortunately.
No, it's not.
Tracie, I want to get you for this piece, because you are in an exceptionally perfect position for this aspect of it all. There is supposed to be, and I'm using the scare quotes, I'm sorry, there's a thing about that, where females are lesser. They're not to be listened to. And if memory serves, I believe it's Matthew or Timothy, where they basically say, yeah, you're female. Yeah, you're not supposed to be talking to us. How? Oh, thank you. See, of course, you're going to know.
That's 11.
Why the hell am I not taking advantage of that? All right.
Really?
But
that's because I'm a woman.
Just
kidding.
I see what you did there. Join us next week when she's not going to be on the show. Thank you so much. But Tracie, you have to deal with folks who call in in some cases a weekly basis, which has got to get annoying after a little while. But how often do you have to put up with people who call in who are male, who are theists of some stripe or other, and you are one of those people that gets to basically say, you're wrong, and I can show you that you're wrong? How many of them actually listen to that part of it and say, well, I'm not going to listen to you anyway? Or how do you break through that if that ever comes?
I'm not sure that on the show that I've experienced much like gender bias with the callers. I think that there's people that call in who are open to an honest discussion, and then there's people who call in who aren't, and I'm really not convinced that they listen any better to the male co-host than they do to me.
Well, yeah, that's the truth.
I think that in general, if they call in, and we're just FYI, I mean, we're one of the few programs that has a caller format that is driven, at least historically was driven to be geared towards theists. So we were a unique vehicle in that regard. And some people would kind of wonder, like, why do you do this? Why do you keep doing it? Because people don't hear you, and the callers are never convinced, and they get argumentative, and half the time you have to hang up on them because they just don't even reason anymore. And we always pointed out that the person who calls is mostly going to get defensive because they're the one on the phone. So they're the person that's on the other side of this dialogue, and when it comes to a religious argument or somebody who is calling in to defend their religion, often they're going to take it really personally and have a hard time hearing you. But what we find a lot of times is people that write to us who have deconverted, who in part would say that it was because of the show. Nobody's ever written in and said it was only because of the show, so just FYI. But people who say that we had an impact on them when they were deconverting will say that they were impacted by listening to the calls. And so that's the thing. It's when somebody's not the person on the other side of that conversation, they hear the person on the phone saying what they would say, but they're in this safe space where they're not the person that feels, quote, attacked. So they can actually hear the response, and when the other person starts to really break down, they are hearing how desperate the person on the call sounds, and they're hearing how well the arguments on our side are working. And so what happens to them is they're like, God, I used to think that was like a really good argument, but now it just looks stupid. And so the impact for the it's not really the question you were asking, but that's more my experience with the show. It's not that I don't think I've ever legitimately heard somebody dismiss me because I'm female from a theist caller. I've had some internet exchanges, like typewritten exchanges, where I'm not even sure it's genuine. I think it's just people getting desperate and lashing out and trying to get a rise, because sometimes if you're losing an argument, you reach for emotional things that you think will upset the other person. So when somebody starts to use like sexist language with me or something like that, I tend to not get defensive about it, because in my mind it's like a sign that I'm doing great. Exactly. So for me, it means I've got this person so far on the ropes that they're just lashing out with any insulting thing they can think of now, because they've run out of arguments, and so I'm really getting to them at this point.
I take it the exact same way.
Yeah, I don't get unnerved by sexism, because I see it as a sign that I've really, really made a hit.
And what I find, I debate on Facebook quite regularly, and
that's an understatement.
Oh, okay, fine. and one of the things that I've been really practicing with is Islam, because I was raised Christian, and I know that crap inside and out. And right now, I think Islam is something that really needs to be targeted. And what drives me batty is the Muslim men that just refuse to even acknowledge my points or even respond to me. And I know bloody well it's because I'm a woman, and half the time, they'll comment some crap on one of my own posts, and then they just refuse to answer. And or all they'll do is like copy pasta the same creepy crap over and over again, and it's frustrating, and because they won't even engage. Or especially on Twitter, I find if I jump into a debate with male Muslims, it's like I just completely kill the debate. They just stop responding. It's like, oh my God, it's women, and they like scatter like.
You're a hot potato, is what you are.
Yeah, and I think part of that is because, as Tracie says, like the sexism doesn't bother me one iota, because I know bloody well that comes from a place of fear, and
right.
It's a sign that I'm doing something right. So in fact, I find the sexism encouraging.
Yep.
And so the minute I dive in there and I'm like, oh yeah, and it's like they scatter like little cockroaches. It's amusing but frustrating as hell too.
But the sexism is a problem, and this is actually getting back to something that Shujin asked earlier, which is how do we get women? How do we get that number closer to 50-50?
Yeah.
And the way that this has to happen is in any male-dominated dynamic, and I've noticed this. I'm in a number of different fandoms. I'm in a number of different, just geeky groups all around, nerd groups, you name it. I probably know something about it. And what I've noticed is that if a woman comes into any male-dominated space, they do not want to engage on any type of realistic equal level. They don't want to let women speak. They don't want to hear it. And unfortunately, from what I've seen, and I'm speaking as an outsider because I'm not part of the atheist community, but I am friends with a lot of people who are, and I see these dynamics from the outside. And what I've also noticed is that this happens in the atheist community as well, where women will speak up and just kind of be given the, well, what the hell do you know anyway, treatment from men that won't even really engage them in a fair conversation. They'll use logical fallacy after logical fallacy just to kind of drive them out of the conversation. And a lot of times guys think they're being fair when they're doing this, and they don't even really know that they're doing it. They think they're being fair, they think they're bringing up valid points, but they're really just talking over women and not giving them the chance to speak. And that, as quickly as anything else, will drive women out of any space.
Let me throw a word past you, a term, and see how you feel about it. Because afterwards, I want to get to Shelley on a piece about this after she comes back. Because pushing those photons and electrons into
well, it's kind of hard, podcasting back to the past from the future,
it's the way it is. So here's the word witchy. The word that I instantly thought of as you were talking about this is parity, as in equality parity, because my pronunciation I know is probably really crappy right now since I'm a little bit on the tired side, but is that
So just to reconfirm, oh God, I'm using my customer service language now. Just to reconfirm, are you parody like Parody or Parity, Shijin?
Equality, parity.
Okay, so Parity. Okay, good. Well, here's the thing, is that there's actually, and it is, there's actually a study, and it's not like this is something that guys are conscious of. There was actually a study that was recently done that kind of, you had men, and pretty much a 50-50 shot of men and women in a college class, and when women spoke, I think it was something like 10% of the time, men thought that they were speaking, I think it was if it was 15 to 30% of the time that women were speaking, men thought the conversation was equal. If it was anywhere above that, but not at 50%, men thought that women were dominating the conversation. It's not that they don't want to hear us speak, it's that they literally are so used to dialoguing back and forth with themselves that any women voice feels like an imposition and feels like an interruption, and if you're used to a male-dominated space and you're a male, that feels unfair, and you kind of naturally fight back against that. And like I said, this happens in pretty much any male-dominated environment where you just kind of have this pushback, and equality is really difficult to get in these situations. Parity is really difficult to get in these situations just because you kind of have to reset the thinking of the guys who are already in the situation and kind of get them to step back, and that's a difficult thing to do to a whole group of people in any dynamic.
Gotcha.
That's the challenge, because a lot of people who are in free thought, not everybody, but a large majority of conferences are formerly religious, and religion, even more liberal religion, all has a vein of that patriarchy running through it. And when a child is raised in a certain manner, they see things and they imitate things, and then they begin to shape their world based upon the way they're raised. We all know that. We've all had to deal with it and move past it and are continually dealing with it. So you're right. A guy may come out of that type of situation, and because he's a man, he doesn't even realize it, or maybe realizes it a little bit, or you never know. But it is completely logical to think that a man can behave in this manner and not even realize it or know it. So the challenge is how do you change that? Because it happens a lot. I can speak to it from conferences, seeing just how people are and how people talk to me about it. But even as a speaker, I go and speak at a fair number of conferences, and I watch people in situations a lot. I'm very sensitive to it because I had to grow up in it, move through it, and then work as a female pastor in the South. So it's better being in the skeptical the skeptics movement as a female who is a public speaker, but it's still not terrific. I will say in the last 4 years, I think it has changed some. We've moved ahead some, but even with seeing more women on stage, generally, things like, and nobody wants to talk about it, but speakers' fees and things like that. I can't tell you how many times I've known a man that will get a good, nice amount of money for a speaker's fee, and I'll be asked to come and they'll give me travel and lodging. So, you know, and if you say anything as a woman, then you become the bitch, right? That's exactly what happens. Now, as I said, it's better in the movement by far, definitely, than it is in the religious world that I came out of. But there's still this undercurrent of it that, you know, I think people brought it with them. Our society is built that way. I mean, to some degree, still it still kind of flows through that men are definitely in that place. But you know, if we want to look around and see why there aren't women sitting in the conferences or inner groups or participating, I think that a lot of the things that everybody's talked about, the sexism, the, you know, girl walks into the room and every guy's jaw drops and he starts to huddle around her. No place for the kids, nothing for the families. You know, all the conference activities are geared more toward guy stuff, and just even from the speakers and the leaders who are females in the movement, feeling that they're still standing below and the guys get to step up that 8 inches and stand on the top part of the stage. You know, I think those are all absolutely accurate representations of this topic that you brought up, which is, I'm really glad you did. Nobody talks about this kind of stuff.
Well, you know, we guys are going to go ahead and say it's an 8-inch step, but you know, most of you guys know full well it's not nearly quite that big a thing to surmount, right?
I actually have a comment. The last 3 speakers have actually reminded me of something that hasn't come up, and I didn't really think about it. But it is like a weird kind of flip side to the sexist thing that I have encountered personally. And that is, there are sometimes people who make assumptions that I guess in their heads they think these are positive assumptions. So it's almost like a sort of objectification that goes in the opposite direction, where they think they're doing you a favor by treating you better or doing something better. I see this a lot because of my role as a host on TAE. People will do things that they think are positive but they're like objectifying me in a way that they think makes me better than other people instead of making me worse than other people, and they seem to think that's okay because they're putting me above other people. And I'm like, no, you don't rank people that way. Like, you have to treat everybody equally, and treating me like a human being is the best thing you can do for me. That is like the biggest compliment anybody can pay me, is to treat me like everyone else. Yeah. And so there's been a few instances, and there's one that I can think of specifically where someone has come to me and also come to Jen, who's like another female that hosts the show, and approached us both to say, hey, you should do like a show on the history of women in secularism or women in atheism. And I always want to say to him, why? Because I have a vagina? It's like I am not endowed with special knowledge of the history of women in secularism just because I'm female. But there's this assumption in their head that somehow I am more qualified to talk about this issue, even though I know nothing about it. And there are people, for example, at ACA who were in Austin and active when Madalyn Murray O'Hair was around, who could speak very knowledgeably about this. And yet I'm being approached as somebody who wasn't even an atheist in those times, you know, when the group was starting or whatever, and they're telling me, why don't you speak about the history of women in secular? And it's like, you know, there are people within the group who are older men who know more about this than I do. But you're approaching me just because I'm female.
Yeah. It's almost like a overcompensation.
Yeah,
well, it's weird. It's like a positive. It's there. I don't want to call it positive objectification in the sense of it being good. It's not good, but it's like they see it as a positive framing, and so they excuse the objectification by saying, "This is I'm thinking something positive about you," and it's like it doesn't matter because you're still not thinking of me as a human being.
I think
it's the same type of thing where, and I'm sorry for interrupting, Heretic women.
No, go for it.
It's the same type of thing where to go back to a lot of the older traditions, quote unquote, pulling out a chair for a woman, holding the door, and it's like these are supposed to things are supposed to be chivalrous, but it's kind of assuming that the woman doesn't have the sense or the ability to do these things for herself, which is why a lot of women today kind of object to it. And it's like, I'm trying to be nice. You're treating me like a child. Why don't you just cut my meat while you're at it and feed it to me while making crane sounds? I mean, come on.
It's funny though, and I think it's a Canadian thing because here everybody holds the door for everybody. So I've never even considered that to be a female thing. But you're right,
but that's
though.
how it should be, though.
Exactly. And that's why when I've heard people complain about the door thing, I'm like, what? But I hold doors for guys all the time. Like, what's the diff?
I have actually had guys at my job, when I've held the door for them, get mad at me. Because it's like, you're a woman, you shouldn't be holding doors. Fine, I'll just let it slam in your face next time.
You know what I really like?
It's ridiculous.
There are people, I've seen people complain, like, I've seen a few guys complain about the idea that women aren't appreciative that they're holding the doors. And that they don't... Are
they wearing a fedora?
Like well, what always makes me laugh is they'll frame it like, and that these women don't know how to appreciate it when you hold the door, quote, for them. And it's like, dude, if you're getting upset that she's not appreciative after she didn't ask you to do it, you didn't do it for her. You did it for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You did it for her, and she said she didn't like it, then your response would be, oh, I'm sorry. I thought you'd like it, but obviously you don't, and, my bad. That's what you do when you're trying to do something kind for another person, and then you find out that's not what they wanted. You tend to say, oh, I assumed that I'm sorry, and, I should have done what you would appreciate, right? Because this is for you, not for me. Yeah. So when you get offended when someone doesn't appreciate what you didn't do it for them. You did it for yourself, unless they asked you to do it. Now, if I could see if someone asked me to do something and then I did it and then they weren't appreciative, I'd be like, wait a second. Yeah. But if somebody doesn't ask you to do something and you do it assuming they're going to like it, and then you find out that they didn't, that's you're bad for making the assumption.
Yeah, I want to jump on this one also, because this is something that's pissed me off so bad. And I'm not saying this as a guy or as an atheist. I'm talking as a human being for a second. If you see somebody and you want to hold the door for them and they don't say anything, they don't grunt, they don't say thank you, okay, it's understandable to be a little bit peeved that, they didn't even acknowledge it, but you held the door. Nobody put a gun to your head and told you to do it. What the fuck?
Yeah, I honestly don't even get upset when people don't thank me. I always hold doors for people, and I don't care. My mother used to be like, she'd hold a door, and if somebody walked through and they didn't say thank you, she would very nastily respond, "You're welcome." And I always thought that was like the most nasty thing. And I hold the door, you go in, that's fine. I don't care if you say thank you, don't say thank you. I don't care. I'm holding the door because it's me, not you. I hold the door for people behind me.
Like here, I probably wouldn't even notice if anybody said thank you. I just do it because that's what you do here.
Exactly.
But I will say the cliche is true. If you bump into somebody on the street accidentally, both of you are supposed to say sorry. That's just how it goes.
Well, you're also Canadian, so yes.
Yes. Exactly.
So, I've got a question from Chris. I'm sorry?
Go, Shelley.
Yeah, I was gonna get to you in as a matter of fact right now, Shelley. We've got a question from Chris. I'm gonna get to you in just a second on that, Chris.
Culture shocks. Yeah.
Yeah. What I wanted to ask you, Shelley, before I get over to that question was, as a musician, you're able to tackle a lot of questions about how people are, how they act, the human condition. Boil it down to that. Have you ever done any music or any writings that have any kind of addressing with this whole idea of just being nice, the humanistic part of it all, instead of people, forgive me, being dicks to each other?
I have one song that I wrote with a American singer-songwriter and guitarist called Adam Levy, and it's called Glad You Asked. And it's just about that someone's having a bad day, and just the difference that the support or a kind word from a stranger or someone you love, or it's just the difference that can make in a person's life. And another song with a humanist message, I have a song called Hitchhiking Song, and the concept occurred to me when I was hitchhiking in Europe, and normally, got very good luck with very kind people picking us up. But this one time, someone saw me and my friend and pulled over and motioned for us to come and watched us put on our packs and walk over, and then he started laughing and drove away. And so I wrote this song saying, why can't we, feel safe to trust each other and support each other, and I guess coming to terms with the fact that everyone's in their own situation, and a lot of the time that people put something negative out to you, it's because they're not particularly content or happy in their own lives and experiences, and to be able to, I said, this is my love song to everyone on the earth. You can treat me like your sister, or you can treat me like dirt, and I'll still love you for whatever it's worth. And I guess, for me, that humanism is about, understanding to the extent that we can the way that people are, and having a warmth and a love for that regardless. And I guess looking at ways of minimizing harm as much as we can.
Beautiful. All right, so the message that Chris had put up over here, and it took me a couple of times to read through it, and it's not because of the way that you wrote it, it's because I'm trying to, as I've said on many occasions before with the show, trying to listen to what the panelists are saying and read and comprehend both at the same time is still not an easy thing. I keep trying, so thank you. What he put across to us all, and Teresa and Dridgit, I'm gonna have you guys have first stab at this one, just to again, balancing act, trying to keep everything working the way it's supposed to. He puts over here, quote, do you think the passion a lot of the recently deconverted feel, where they suddenly have so much to say that they couldn't before, contributes to the lack of parity issue in atheist groups, with the men not being aware they're shutting others out? Now, it's a lot in there, and he didn't put any extra punctuation, so I'm kind of trying to read it the way that I think that it's being presented to us. So if I've missed out on some nuance on that, my apologies. I'm just kind of working with what I got. So which one of you wants to go ahead and take on this one first off?
I'm not sure I understood the question.
Okay, let me see if I can. Or Dridgit, did you want to try to parse it a little bit, or?
I was going to say I really don't think so, because we see this in society in general. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it has anything to do with the movement.
Okay.
Like, Tracie, what he was getting at is that a guy who's a new atheist, recently deconverted, and new atheist in general, gets so excited that, oh, I'm with people that I can finally talk to openly, that they maybe don't realize that they're drowning out other people, and specifically women.
The floodgate.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, though, that would... I would expect that same thing from new atheist women that show up.
Yeah.
If it was just about the excitement of finally being with like-minded people.
Exactly.
I've actually found that a lot of people, I mean, it's different people, I guess. Some people that show up at the meetups that seem to be new to the movement, sometimes they are really chatty, but then a lot of times they're really quiet. A lot of times they're pretty shy.
I find that they're more quiet because again, it's all new. It can be very overwhelming, and they're just trying to sort of soak in everything and understand, you know, other people's views and what their options are, and they maybe aren't even sure where they are in their own beliefs or lack of beliefs, and there's just so much going on with them that they don't want to step in and get too animated because they oftentimes feel like, well, I'm just new to the game, I don't know what I have to contribute yet. And they just want to kind of soak it in first.
The one thing I see that they usually want to get out the hardest is their testimonial. Like, you know, this is what happened, and this is why I became an atheist. That's like usually the initial really important thing they want to communicate.
Yeah. And that's healthy because they're like, hey, I have this thing that happened, and I have this story, and here's what makes me unique in my sort of admission to the group, and it's their personal story. And I think we all want that sort of recognition, like, yeah, you've been through it too, awesome, welcome, kind of thing.
Yeah, Teresa, that's a good piece for you. Again, you've done conferences, you've done a number of them. What about the folks that are coming in and contacting you for probably their first time of, you've inspired me, I finally came out, and do you get to see that very much, that there seems to be a disparity between men who want to talk with you about how things have gone for them versus the women that have converted out?
No, I think I get a decent amount of both, but I do have, well, I've not thought about numbers before. There are a lot of women who contact me and talk to me, especially in the first year. Probably there were more, but it's still a lot, actually. Private message on Facebook, and even now, like I said, it's almost 4 years. The story is almost the same. You know, until you stood up on that stage, I didn't know there was a woman like you in free thought movement, and it's even tough for me to say it because I just don't think, you know, about myself. You know, if you, Shelley and Tracie and Dridgit, you guys have all met me and you know me. I just want to hang out. I don't want to be anything more than that. I want to give my talk because I really love doing it, and I just want to hang out. And so for a person to come up to me at a talk, a guy or a woman, and say, I was really struggling, and I saw you, and you were so brave, and you were so courageous, and I didn't know that you know, I'd never seen a woman do that kind of thing, and it's just like, please don't stop. I'm a scaredy person, and you know, I'm just like everybody else. I just happen to have a big mouth.
Well, I kind of say the same things. I mean, the way that I talk about it for myself on this is that, you know, I'm lucky enough that I've got leftover webcam, and I've got a mic that I invested $40 in. That makes me special? No, it just makes me so vain like crazy. That's all.
Well, about 2 years after I came out in D.C., I finally settled on something that lets me, I don't know if you would say it lets me feel good about what I'm doing, because I feel good regardless. I'm helping people, but I realized that because of whatever crazy set of circumstances occurred, I have an opportunity to stand up and to be visible and to say things. And I know that it's effective because I get these messages from people. And I get women contacting me, pastors' wives. I get so many from pastors or deacons' wives saying, you know, I'm questioning my faith, or I'm an agnostic, or I think I'm a deist maybe, or, you know, I'm definitely an atheist. And they're trapped just like I was trapped, like so many people are trapped. And they feel that they can talk to me. They feel that they're safe. Men too, which I like men, so that works for me too.
As one of them, thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm so much like, I think, Tracie, you're the one who said that you want to just be seen as a human being. Most times, I'm not perfect, but most times that's all I ever see are human beings. And it takes somebody to say something. Being back in the South, I see it more often with racism and other things. somebody coming up to me and saying, "Oh yeah, remember that girl you were talking to, your black friend?" I'm like, "My what?" You know, because I'm just not used to that anymore. The same thing with guys. I don't know. It's just people. And so when people speak to me, they come up to me, unless they're threatening me, and I've been threatened by women and men both in the movement, so, you know, it's pretty equal on my territory, but it's late and I'm rambling, so
It's okay.
Put a question up there and say, okay, so at 12:30 Central Time, Teresa MacBain really rambles a lot. That's the answer.
See, this is why I always apologize to the folks that come on for the first time, because the late hour. I know full well it's late, and I apologize for that, but we end up getting some really good discussions because of that too, because, you know, things kind of loosen up a little bit, except for Shelley, because it's the middle of the day for you, and, you know, thank you very much for that.
Well, and the fact that I'm always up at this hour anyway. This is like noon for me.
Yes. But Shelley, let me kind of pull part of this with, as a storyteller, which as somebody who wanted to go into music originally, as a storyteller, because that's you know, easily half of it all. Have you? I'm not quite sure how to ask the question exactly, but hearing all of the people, and I almost feel like I'm quoting from the Beatles for a second, hearing all of the stories, hearing the people that you've had the opportunity of talking with, because you've done various circuits and performances live in places, and I got to imagine people end up contacting you one way or another, talking to you at venues and such. Yeah. How has that played out for you, as far as to, you know, who ends up talking with you more? Have you noticed any particular disparity and how they talk to you, whether it's as a musician or as a musical atheist, I guess is maybe one way of putting it.
That's a cool way.
Thank you. I try really. I really do, believe it or not. I really do try to think through these things before I try to pose them, and it's hard.
When you say musical atheist, I have this image of somebody with like a wind-up thing on their back.
As long as we're not, you know, with symbols, that would be kind of creepy.
That's scary.
But,
yeah.
And, you know, I have to say it like this. I don't know if I've just been given a huge compliment or insulted hugely in such a way that I just love it. So thank you very much.
The answer, Shujin, is yes.
Yes.
Appreciate that.
Very similar to what Teresa was saying. You know, I haven't thought really ever before about it in terms of numbers, but definitely a lot of men and a lot of women and a lot of young people you know, come up and talk to me after the shows, and that is easily up there with one of the most rewarding parts of this job, because, as you say, like, and I agree, music and songwriting is storytelling, and I always speak from my experience, because I feel like all we have is our experiences, and that is what shapes our worldview, and that is what shapes our ethics and our philosophy and the way that we interact with other people. So when I share my stories, I'm really sharing my experiences and trying to say, you know, this is what happened to me, and it made me kind of come to this conclusion. And that's why I believe what I believe now, and I find that storytelling as a way of putting across your worldview can be a lot less, just a lot more accessible to people than maybe an argument or a debate, because, you know, they're just listening to you and you're creating the whole world in which you're putting your message across. And so when I get to talk to people after the shows and after conferences, it's really a chance for me to hear their stories, and their story is become part of my story, because you know, I'm hearing their experiences and reshaping the way that I even experience my own. Meant this to me, and it reminded me of of this experience in my life, and then I carry that story with me, and the next time I play that song, that person or the way that they change the meaning of the song comes into my mind, and I might share that story on stage. So it's really beautiful. It's like this patchwork of stories that just keeps growing and changing and evolving. And I think it's really important for people to feel that they can
This is the piece that
can
sucks
share that story, and that their stories are, and telling my say to people, and
Uh-oh.
Yep. Uh-oh.
Shelley?
The future's become hazy.
Yeah, I've lost.
This is what happens when you don't use a proper flux capacitor in your podcast.
Flux capacitor. Oh wow, you're so.
I told you I'm a nerd.
Oh, me too. Well, if I can ramble one more minute, I mean, we're talking a lot about the disparity and the way that women have to in the free thought movement, we have to fight in the same ways that we've fought in religious groups. But I wanted to just to say at Apostacon this past year in Dallas, I went to the conference and I gave my talk, and I kind of hide out in my room before I give my talk, which is why I hope I have it early in the conference, because I'm usually so nervous that I'm not real sociable. Mm-hmm. So I got to give my talk, and this group of folks came out to sit at, vape, and so we'll go out to the little vaping area and sit, and there's 4 guys that are they're the ones who are doing the Atheist TV now, some young guys, absolutely great bunch of guys, and then there were the rest of us who were sitting out there. Spent almost the whole weekend out there with them, talking to me, asking questions, talking about, I do web design and graphic design on the side, and I started doing a little video editing. I mean, just always doing kind of, like you said, geeky, nerdy stuff. We talked Doctor Who, we talked all kinds of stuff, and just had the greatest conversations. So smart, and they treated me like a human being. And yeah, I spent way too much time out there instead of being inside hanging out with everybody else. But that just reminded me, and should let us all know, that it's there. There are people who are just stand-up people, and some of these guys, I think, were the age of my son, like in their mid-20s, and then there were just the whole spectrum. But everybody out there were all different races, men and women, and that's the kind of thing that I really look for and want. I want us to get to that point, because we make claims, and as I've said several times, we're getting there, but we've just got to be aware of it. And again, we're talking about it on this show, and I'm really, really just want to thank you again, and thanks to all of you guys who are on here with me. You guys. See, even our languages.
But you know what? In Canada, we say that in Canada instead of y'all, so,
Well, I would say y'all, but I'm trying to curb my southern accent. It's gotten really bad since I moved back to Alabama anyway. And the later it gets, the worse it'll be.
Don't worry.
That's okay.
We've only got about another half an hour scheduled time, so don't even sweat it. There's a couple of stuff that have come up on the Q&A. I've been, like I mentioned before, really trying to read through them really quickly and digest it. So let me read these really quickly, because there's a piece that I want to hit because of what you said, Teresa, and we'll end up finishing off on that particular piece. But really quickly, fly through these to get through them. First off, Unrenewed Tech, who's reminding you, rambling is okay, but falling asleep on the show, that's his gig. So don't take his shit.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind.
Wake up. Somebody tap him on the shoulder so he wakes up.
Well, when we're separated by a couple hundred miles, tapping on the shoulder doesn't work well.
Yeah.
Rats. Oh well.
Yeah, it's all right. Let's see what was over here. Joseph had put, there we go, yes, this one in particular. Quote, someone trying to make a point being reminded that they are a woman as an answer, thus ignoring the point or adding an in spite of it, must be kind of like a kick in the nuts. I understand where you're coming from, but I pretty well understand it from the standpoint of I have never treated anybody as, well, you're a guy, so you get it, versus you're a girl, so you don't get it. But I'll try to. I'm not entirely sure how to really explain it. Anybody want to chime in on that one in particular?
Well, you actually find this interesting thing where if there's a woman-centered or female-centered conversation going on, a lot of times you'll have someone come in and go, well, as a guy, and completely just
Derail the whole thing.
Conversation. And I mean, it's the same type of thing where, you know, it's like, well, you're a girl, so you wouldn't get it, or you're a woman, so you wouldn't get it. And it's just this whole concept of kind of treating the viewpoint as, well, my experience is superior to yours because of gender, because of reasons, because of religion, you know, whatever reasons that they might have. But especially, you know, in the instance of male domination of conversations, you know, we get that a lot.
It almost sounds like you don't understand the Bible because you're not a Christian, or you don't have the Holy Spirit kind of crap.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was trying to drive to, but it's late and I'm tired.
That's okay.
It's just because you're a little bit out of practice, which, quite all right. I would like to think that as the host of the show, I try very consciously not to make dick moves like that. And again, talking about how our language gets to be that way, I don't ever want to talk like that because I'm a guy or because I'm the host. I always want to make sure that we talk through because we talk through, and I want all those perspectives. I don't want to suddenly steer and say, well, because of, you know...
I can actually say that you tend to be more like, hey, I'm more interested in what you have to say because you're a woman. Because you don't get that opportunity as much. That tends to be your approach, so that's cool.
Well, I appreciate that. I would like to think that it's much more a matter of, you have perspective I don't have. I want your perspective. Download that to my brain. Because, and Witchie, you know this, I want that in my face.
There is a little bit of a danger to that, though. In one of the things that I'll get is I'll have male friends every now and then will ask me, you know, why do women do this? Or this woman that I'm dealing with has done this, and like, why is she doing that? And I will say, do I do that? And they'll say no, and I'll say, then why are you asking me?
And it becomes a thing where we kind of become like a monolith.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, well, because you have a vagina, obviously you know everything that everyone else with a vagina knows.
Yeah, the idea of saying, like, you don't understand this because you're not a guy is to me just as bad as somebody saying, I'm going to ask you this because you're a woman and you'll know why women, you know, or what is the woman experience here? And it's like, I don't know. I'm not necessarily... I
always have to laugh when I hear when you see the jokes about, you know, oh, we just can't understand women and stuff like that. I laugh, and not because they're the same way they're laughing. I'm like, I don't get what you're saying. I don't get that there's a disconnect between what men and women know because I've never seen it.
One of the funniest things I saw on Facebook was when there was some kind of a thing going on about rejection in dating. And Jen Peebles posted something, and some guy wrote back to her and said, you don't know what it's like to be rejected by a woman. And of course, Jen is, and I'm like, okay. And so Jen was just like, this is hysterical. Like, I'm married to a woman, and I've dated women for years, and you're telling me I've never been rejected? But that's the thing. It's like he's looking at this like, you're a female, so you don't understand what it's like, this experience of being rejected by women. And she's like, do you even know who you just said that to?
So now he's being sexist and heteronormative.
There you go.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, and believe it or not, in a way, this actually kind of comes over into another question that had come up from Katie. Quote, I think the attitude of male dominance is so ingrained that many men don't realize they actually are still behaving in a negative way. And somehow or other, that feels like it falls right into that, Tracie.
I agree with that.
Mm-hmm. I think so. The same way I said, hey, guys, part of it, it's planted in our brains, and we have to be conscious and work on it and acknowledge it.
It's funny, though, because as I say, we say you guys instead of y'all, but it's so ingrained here as a non-gender thing. So even though intellectually I know that guys is meant to be a masculine descriptor, I don't process it that way. To me, you guys is hey, you people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's the difference. I don't know if it's a cultural thing or what, but that's just how I've always processed it, as you guys as you people. And maybe that's not such a good thing, just because then I'm losing the masculinity of the term. I don't know.
Well, it's interesting because, I grew up and I've always been in publishing, and I really was into English lit, and when I was younger, even as a kid, so I've constantly been involved in literature and writing, and especially published writing. And so for me, it wasn't that I didn't see the point, but it just never struck me when people used the masculine gender as the populist gender. So they would say, when they were referring to all people, they would use terms like mankind, and they would use he, and there was never this. Today, when you look at publishing, you'll see this diversity of gender references, but you didn't have that when I was growing up. It was anytime you were writing about, and you were taught this as being correct. The correct way to write was when you were referring to all people, you used masculine pronouns.
Yeah, that's exactly.
And so it doesn't hit me as an immediate negative thing because I'm so used to it. But I definitely see the problem with it. When someone points out the problem, I see that, but I don't have the same visceral reaction that somebody else might if they were, for example, to read an old textbook and say, why are they only ever referencing he's? Right? I'm sure it would be weirder for a young woman in graduate school today if she were looking at these old textbooks and these, and reading, and everything was masculinized.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I mean, and I don't know about you guys, but for me, we talked about all these different issues, and we even touched on and said, these are the problems, and how do we fix it? And as we've talked, I've thought about that a lot, and I think for me, the thing that would show that would make me just happy would be for a person to say, I acknowledge this. And this is something that we need to work on, and acknowledge it across the aisle and say, okay, I want to work on this, I want to help, we want to make this better. I promise you I'll screw up, but I'm working. Yeah. Because that's my statement. I screw up all the time. Ask my husband. But I think that's probably the road, the place that I'm looking for, is to find those young guys that I was out there talking to. They just were, they really were just drinking in the things where I was speaking, and I had some type of knowledge about it that they wanted, and vice versa. So I think that's where I want to see us get, is to a place where on both sides of the argument, hey, I acknowledge it, I'm learning, let's work this out together.
Now that's actually bringing us right over to the place where I wanted to finish us out, and I want to give you guys all an opportunity of kind of dealing with this. And like I said, Teresa, it's because of what you were talking about that really caught me onto this. We've dealt with a lot of the pieces of what's been happening now. The people who are into their adulthood, who have been coming out, who have been making their way through. The women especially, trying to see about what we can do to help them feel more comfortable, safe, to be able to come out, to find out that, yes, you do have that support, that there is a family of choice that's available for you, for just the askins. But and Shelley, I'm going to be coming over to you first because I've not nearly gotten the opportunity of getting you to talk with us as much as I would have liked. So my apologies on that. But here's the area I want to finish this out with. Teresa was talking about being able to just sit and chat up, just be a person with people who are noticeably younger in their younger years, young adulthood, late teens, early 20s, and they're really kind of coming into their own. From how you see things, how you've had to deal with people so far, and of course being a musician, you're going to hear people who are younger, a younger crowd, of course. How do you think that we can best or continue to be inviting, be open, be welcoming these people and showing them, you know what, we're just people, same as everybody else, we just think differently than a lot of others?
Well, there's two things that I'd like to speak to, and one is like what we've been talking about the whole time with women and hearing voices and hearing different voices. And as Teresa said, I think the movement has changed a lot over the last 4 years, just from what I've seen in terms of being aware of kind of the problems that we're discussing now and starting to think about conferences make a bigger effort for parity between speakers, and certain conferences look at finding a way to make the numbers more equal across attendees as well. And I think that's really positive. And then for my own experience being in the movement and being exposed to ideas and voices and voices that are diversifying that I may not have otherwise encountered from the life that I live in Australia, and it's been really positive, and it's for me to hear those other voices, and I think it's a really positive thing for the movement to diversify and for us to look at atheism and a lot of these issues through many diverse lenses, and I think as we do that more and become more aware of it, that's going to make a better and safer space for people that want to be part of the movement. And so that it's just like this positive feedback loop. There'll be more diverse perspectives represented in the movement, and then people will feel that is a space for them. And so I think, yeah, just the more accessible that we can make it, like what we were talking about before, making it accessible for families and for women, and maybe we have, events that are more financially accessible, because a lot of these conferences and events and some community things do cost money and are prohibitive for people. And I think young people are just, and that's one other demographic that we want to think about how to include. And I think there's a lot of groups across the country who are doing that, who are starting to involve more cultural things in their communities, like art and comedy and music, and or kind of focus on a social thing, or focus on charity and charity drives, or cleaning up the highways, or just normalizing atheism and putting that out there. And I think there's young people that want to be involved in very varied, like across that whole, across all the different approaches. And so when they see people doing that and engaging it and creating community that they want to be part of, then I think they will.
Yeah, very cool. Bridget, let me throw it for you at this point. What do you think about it? How do we help these young kids, these children, by comparison? How do we make it more safer, or at least in feeling for them to be able to come?
Well, I'm actually seeing more young people show up at some of these conferences and things, and I think they have fewer hang-ups than us older folks do, as far as dealing with the other gender and being open about their lack of belief or where they're coming from. And as far as what people were talking about earlier, as family being included and things like that, some of the events now have started including children's activities, which I think is great. Apostacon had babysitting for the younger kids, and then they had activities for the 12 and under and things like that. And I think when we start seeing more of that kind of support for the kids and for the family, that will have more women come. I know that for some people, childcare is a problem, especially for a conference that lasts 2 or 3 days. And you've even wondered yourself, if you were to bring, Tiny Tribble, what would you do for her? And it just depends on the conference.
As a sideline on that one, we have the little one and I have actually discussed going to ReasonCon, and I told her that I want to set her up at that point. She will be, let's see, is 13, 14, 15? Yeah, she'll be 15 at that point. And I've already told her that what I would love to see is to videotape, not that anybody uses a real videotape anymore, to video record her going up to the guys at Scathing Atheist just to look over up a little bit up at Heath and go, oh, so you're the guy that talks about puppy raping all the time. Okay. And walk away. And just watch Heath go, what just happened? It's a thought. It's a thought. We'll see. But I'm sorry. It's she. We've talked about this, and it's. I know it's completely uncouth to talk about things in such respect, but I think that would be just glorious to have that video on hand for later. That's all.
He wouldn't know what to say.
Exactly my point, and that's the beauty of it all, because I think all three of them would just, for the moment, completely and utterly unable to talk at all. I think that would be, and of course Noah would just break his rib all over again. But that's tough.
Yeah.
So, Heretic Woman, let me go ahead and get you, and I'll finish off with Teresa and Tracie at the end of it.
Well, where we are here, we're in a cluster of university towns. There's actually 3 universities and 2 colleges right around in the 4 cities that I'm within a half an hour of. And our main monthly meetup takes place in not my town, but one town over. And we do tend to see some of the university kids coming in, and there have been a couple that are like, I'm away from home, I can go to an atheist meetup, which is really nice. And the unfortunate thing is, once school kicks in, they generally don't ever have time to come back. Excuse me, which is too bad, but that does help, and we're always really encouraging of any of the young people that do show up, but we make an extra effort to kind of make them more comfortable. Excuse me. And the same with ladies too. Like I say, generally it tends to be me and a bunch of guys. And like Tracie said, I don't even notice half the time when that happens anymore. I went to see with one of my buddies. We drove to Toronto to see Richard Carrier. I ended up at dinner with him and a bunch of people, and I realized, wow, it's me and 8 guys again. Woohoo! And that just sort of what happens. But at our meetups, where we actually are pretty aware of the lacking sometimes, and so even though there's a couple of guys and that are like, hey, she's cute, they don't tend to, be all over her, which is really good. They're better than that. They'll tell me later, wow, that was cute. Is she single? But they'll save it for later. But we are like, hey, it's another woman. Woohoo! Come on in. Take a seat. Let's talk. And we try to be excited about that. And one thing that's really cool, actually, on the flip side of that, is we've got a couple of senior ladies that come all regularly, and they're the best because they've got so much experience and so many things that they've gone through, and they get really excited about the young people too, and they're like, hey, you know, I wanna nurture this, and I want to make sure that they feel welcome, and we have so much to learn from them too. One of the ladies in our group is over 70, and she was actually raised as an atheist, and so her experience is really unique because most of us aren't. Even in Canada, we don't, you know, everybody tends to come from some sort of religious background, so they really kind of bring a lot of richness to the discussion that you know, we don't always see. So I think, look, at least in our little group, we try to be as diverse and welcoming as we can, and it does help. It definitely does help. And you know, it's great when other ladies come and we can be like, hey, that's great, we want your take on all of this, we want your input. And I don't think, and maybe again it's because we're up here, I don't see that whole like talking over women or being uncomfortable that they're in the conversation. I don't see that, but maybe that's, I don't know, maybe it's because we're Canucks, I don't know, but we try, we do our best.
Teresa, let me go ahead and give you your opportunity on that.
I'll be quick about it. I know those of you who commented on my rambling are like, yeah, I will believe it when we see it. You know, we've talked about so many different things, and we're ending it all up, tying it in with basically how can we bring healing to this situation for younger people that are coming in, and for all of us who are in the middle, and then senior ladies, as you said, Heretic woman, that was really cute. And I have to think about, you know, my life's experience up until I was 44 was not just in being a religious person, being a Christian, but being a leader in religion. And the studies started coming out a few years ago about why are people leaving the church? Why are they leaving the church? And I saw an article on my Flipboard. I get the Christianity Today still. Don't worry, I'm just trying to keep up with what's going on. And the reasons are the same. People leave the church because it's polarizing. It is intolerant. It's very dogmatic. They treat minorities badly, whether they be women or people of race or gay or lesbian, and don't even bring transgender into it because that's just, you know, they're not even going to talk about that. There's no diversity. It's black church, it's white church, it's, you know, and I don't want to see us in that same position. I think we can run the risk of doing the same thing. We are free thinkers, and we have an opportunity. We've all said we've seen things getting better, and so personally, I think that it's going to be folks like us, all of us, guys, gals, y'all, whatever you want to call us, mankind, humankind, you know, womankind. I've never heard anybody say womankind. But anyway, that's how we're going to make it better. And people want it. People need it. I'll give my 2-second plug. I'm the director of the Hotline Project. It is a 24-hour phone call-in. We are launching a live chat crisis line at the end of February, and we get people who call and talk to us about this very, very same thing many, many times. They want to connect, they want to be with people, and will suggest, let us find your group, and they will say something similar to some of the things we've heard here. So the problem is pervasive, but I don't think that means that it's all bad. I think it just means that we're growing, and we're in the terrible twos, and you know, kids in terrible twos, they like to drool on things, and they want to snatch your toys, and they stomp and pitch fits and have temper tantrums, and but then they come running back with their cuddly teddy bear and blankie, and they want you to rock them and to sleep, and you get all that warm fuzzy goodness. and yes, I need my oldest son to have a baby, so I have a grandchild. But I think that's where we are. And so, yeah, acknowledge all the crap that we're trying to solve, but also acknowledge that we are working on it, and that there is good. There's a lot of good about us. So that's it. That's my 2 cents. If you want to volunteer for the Hotline Project, go to hotlineproject.org. There you go. I got my bid in.
We'll have that all in there in just a couple of moments. And Tracie, you get to clean up for everybody at this point. How would you suggest?
Well, I'd actually like to point to a few projects and groups that I think are doing a really good job of it. So, for example, I've been a huge promoter of Chris Johnson's project, the Atheist book, that has been promoting a better life, the idea of diversity in atheism, and just kind of showing atheists as people and human beings, and trying to put a more welcoming face on us, because for so long I think that religious groups have owned the dialogue around what is an atheist, and they have every reason to paint that as ugly as possible. And so when you have a project like what Chris is doing that tries to show the positive side of it, that literally takes a whole bunch of atheists and says, what gives you joy? What makes your life meaningful? And give them an opportunity to talk about the positive things in their life that aren't really related to religion or the negative aspects of struggles with church-state separation and all the things that people like to point at and say, well, this is the ugly, negative, hateful atheist being all, tearing down religion and all the things that are good and godly. He just took it and said, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about what makes you happy. And so he put out this whole thick, gorgeous book that promotes the idea of, atheists as happy people, and the good, positive things that gets us out of that confrontational dialogue and gets us into just being human beings. And one of the things that I like about what he's doing is that he's, the book itself, I'm gonna, just to be honest, it's like a very colorful book, and so it's a very expensive book. But he has been promoting the film version of it and traveling all over the place. And one of the things that is uncomfortable for me is that he featured me in the film. So when I talk about it, it almost seems like a self-promotional thing because I'm talking about a project that I was featured in. But I want to just point out that I promoted this project before he ever got to the concept of the film idea. And that the reason I supported it and the reason I agreed to participate was because I believed in what he was doing. It's not that I'm promoting what he did because I'm in it. It's I was in it because I thought it was a great project. And he did a really excellent job with it. And I think that, what you have there is one person who had this idea and said, why doesn't someone do that? And then said, why don't I do that? And then he went and he got grant funding and he did it. I mean, Chris he was a photographer in New York. He wasn't a filmmaker. He wasn't a documentarian, but he was just like, hey, I think I could do this. And I think that people need to go ahead and take that initiative. A lot of times at the Atheist Experience, we get mail from people saying, hey, you guys should do this and you guys should do that. And there's all of these thousands of people who have ideas about what we need to do. And it's like, you know what? If you have a good idea about what should be done, go ahead and do it. There's nothing stopping you from initiating this yourself, and you don't have to sit around and wait for the Atheist Experience to do it for you. You can do it. You want to see a particular type of style of podcast? Guess what? Lots of people make podcasts. Go make your podcast. If you have an idea and you think it's worth doing and you don't think we're doing it on the Atheist Experience, we don't have to do it on the Atheist Experience. You can still do it. There's room for it if you think it's a good idea. And the other thing is there's a group called the Piedmont Humanists in South Carolina, which is just, a regular meetup group. They are doing some really excellent work. And I have to say that if people have groups and they're trying to come up with ideas on how to improve their family outreach, like a few people have been talking about, accommodating families and children. They do tons of family-friendly events. They have all this wild outreach stuff that when they tell, there's a person working over there that keeps, giving me these plugs because I basically said, tell me what you guys are doing and I'll plug it for you on my Facebook wall. And so they sent me these things, and after a while I was like, you are one heck of an active group, and you are really, the work you're doing is incredible. Like, I can't believe what you're accomplishing in your little meetup group, and this would be a fantastic model for other meetup groups. I mean, they have people that are giving these little TEDx talks. They're doing all kinds of running around and promoting to the churches, and I mean, they are really doing some outreach to say they work with all kinds of church groups in the community to like work hand in hand with them. Again, it's a humanist group, but they also have started now a promotional thing where they're saying that they feel like as a humanist group, it's their job to kind of address the negative atheist issue, because they feel like that's a bigoted thing that needs to be looked at. And so they're taking that on too. They're so active and so positive in their promotion of their group that I would say that any other groups that are like, what can we do to improve, or what can we do to do some more community outreach or be more family friendly, you might want to just go ahead and try to see if you can join the Piedmont Humanists online and get an idea of the type of things that they're doing, because I think they're a great model for meetups. So that's kind of my 2 cents, is just like look at who's doing it right, or the people that you think are doing a great job, and ask yourself, how did they get that start? And then do it. Don't wait for someone else to do it. Do it.
Just do it. Yep.
Yep.
Yep. That's a piece of information I'm going to end up using in my 104th episode, which is
Yes.
our actual 2-year worth of episode show, and that one's also going to be a special one, and I'll talk a little bit more about that one a little bit later. As it is, let me close this out with a real quick piece of information, because my closings tend to be almost as long as my opening, but make this one simple. We've got so many pieces that keep people away, and we've heard about them. The lack of support, disfellowship, becoming away from everything and everyone that you ever had before, personal loss, professional loss, loss of face in some cases. One of the things that we really, really need to remind people as possible, even above discounting the claims that are false, which some of us do more than others, some of us are more visible than others, what I think that we really need to do is to remind people there's a safe place. You may not be able to see the floor, but it's right underneath that level of fog, that FUD level, that fear, uncertainty, and doubt that's hiding it from you. The floor is just a couple of inches underneath what you can see. It's there. It's safe. And if you stumble a little bit, it's okay. We are here too. The water's safe. Just put your toe in and you'll be able to find out. We promise. We are here for you.
Yep.
And you've got a much, much bigger family than you ever would have imagined if you just ask. Nobody knows that better than those of us who have come through religion and found out it's okay. Teresa is a perfect example. If you don't know how wonderful it could be, find that video. And forgive me for pimping you out this way, but that has been talked about on so many different podcasts, you wouldn't believe it.
Wow.
Go look and see what her experience was like in that 5 minutes, and you will recognize it's safe. Come on in and join the party. We'll set out an extra plate for you. As always, everyone, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. We hope that you've enjoyed all of our perspectives. We think that they're all worthwhile, and thank you for having the opportunity with us. This was our 100th episode, and I could not be more proud to close this one out in the style that we've got. I would like to take an opportunity, first off, to thank Witchie Bunny. She had to step off early because she was not feeling well, which completely understandable. She's a little first off, she's a little out of practice, and understandably so. So, Hun, thank you so very much. Whatever contact information she'd like to have, I'll make sure we're in the show notes for everybody. I would like to thank very grandly Tracie Harris. Thank you so much for your time this morning, and by all means, plug all of the things that you'd like us to put into the show notes for you and such.
Great, thank you for having me.
Nothing you'd like to plug in particular?
Oh, well, I mean, the projects that I'm involved with, the Atheist Community of Austin Outreach, mainly it's the Atheist Experience, the nonprofits. If we ever revive the Godless Bitches, we'll see if that ever happens. But yeah, I mean, we've got an annual bat cruise. You might want to check that out in the fall. I mean, we have some things that we do. Mm-hmm. So that's the group that sponsors mainly the work that I've done that's gotten my face out there. So I think that's the group I need to thank.
No worries. We'll make sure that's all in the notes for you. Of course, Shelley, thank you so very much for your time this afternoon for you. And by all means, plug everything and anything that you've got at this point. Oh, that's right. I almost forgot. By the way, Nick Morganmore wanted me to specifically say hi for him.
Who? Sorry?
Nick Morgan. Zandy Anderson, Nick Morganmore. Moved to Alabama.
No, I can't say.
Oh. Okay. Sorry. So, okay. Plug all your
I
stuff
can't do it for too long. It's too mean.
And you can't say you're too tired, Shelley.
No. Hi, Nick. Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and it's been great to be part of this discussion and hear everyone's perspective. I make a lot of music. You can stream all my music for free on Bandcamp. It's also a cool place to buy my digital music. I also have a website, ShelleySegal.com, and you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Google+, and or you can buy hard copies of my music from my website. I also work with a charity called Sweet Princess Charitable Trust, and they raise money and bring musicians into the homes of sick children and their families playing music. Yeah. And also an extra plug for the Hotline Project, which I'm trying to get all my training done so I can be part of it. I think it's a really, really incredible project, and thank you to Teresa for managing that and for providing that service to people.
Thank you, Shelley. Teresa, thank you very kindly for your time. Greatly appreciate it. And by all means, plug all the stuff quite correctly.
Well, I will definitely throw a plug out for the Clergy Project. The Clergy Project, again, was another piece to my sanity. And you can find out all about other either former ministers who were atheists or current ministers who are closeted atheists at clergyproject.org. Of course, my baby, which is the Hotline Project. We're almost a year old. We're going to launch the live chat hotline on our 1-year anniversary, our 1-year birthday, February 27th. It will be online. Shelley, this may actually work better for you. The chat is just like if you were to go online and you needed to chat with AT&T about your phone bill. It's the same type of interface. We're really, really proud of it. We've worked hard on it. And so please, if you want to volunteer, we'll train you. We will train you so well. You will be like the best agent ever. And a terrific family, very supportive. It's the neatest place to work and not get paid for it, of course, but we're all volunteers. So yeah, hotlineproject.org, please check that out. And our parent organization, of course, Recovering from Religion. You can find them. We're all just our names, hotlineproject.org, recoveringfromreligion.org. You can find me on Facebook and Twitter. Just use my first and last name. That's MacBain, M-A-C-B-A-I-N. My husband is Scottish. And yeah, follow me, like me, do all those nice, kind things. Yeah. I don't have Instagram. I'm behind times. So, and
okay.
again, I thank you for this opportunity. It's been terrific. To all those who are here that are guests along with me, opening up the conversation for this is really huge. And it's a 100th episode. So congratulations to you, but I also give you my applause for the work you're doing.
I appreciate that. Bridget, thank you for your time, of course, and go ahead and plug it because it's already in the show notes anyway as a standing item.
Come visit my blog at bridgetfitch2112.wordpress.com.
And Heretic Woman, thank you so much for your time. Have a good morning. Stay warm.
Thank you.
And what are we going to throw on for you real quick?
Oh,
Joseph's not here.
I know, so I have to take care of everything this week. So, first of all, my own show, Beyond the Trailer Park, Mondays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern on YouTube. My lovely co-host ladies, Miss Ashley and Beth. This week we are talking to Nico Simard, who is a local in Ontario here. He has a podcast called The Infidel and a YouTube channel called Atheism TV, so we're going to chat with him this week. Then, of course, there's Atheist Apocalypse at atheistapocalypse.com. Season 2 is coming out actually now, as it is now officially February 1st where I am. So, or sorry, tomorrow. Yeah, I know. But it's coming out, and we're excited about that. Lots of new characters and things happening there. atheistapocalypse.com. And this tomorrow, or today now, I guess, on Sunday, I'm actually appearing on No Religion Required with Bobby C. and my co-host, Miss Ashley. And this is really special for me because I'm going to talk about being an ally who has just had a family member come out as trans and what that's like as the family member and how that's affected me and what that experience is like. And so that's really special to me because it's only been 3 weeks, and even as an ally, and I've always, like, as long as I've known about trans people, I've always been an ally. It's a heck of a lot of a different thing when it happens in your own life. So we're going to talk about that tomorrow, and so that's really special for me. I'm really excited about that. So I think that's everything for now.
Good enough. Wow. Best of luck on that one, by the way.
Thank you.
So, everybody, thank you very much for your patience in working through. And for those of you that have been following along for these 100 episodes, even if it's only been 3 episodes, thank you. I have got somebody that I will be thanking grandly come 104, but this has been quite the journey so far. I had always anticipated being able to hit this point because you look at the numbering scheme, it was always 3 digits. I'm really grateful that I was able to make it. Thank you for coming along for the ride. We've still got a lot more shows that we're going to continue to do, of course, but in the meantime, we need to get our butts on out of here. So, of course, for all of you that have been with us tonight, as always, I wish you the peace I no longer have. I wish you the strength that I've learned. I wish you well. And of course, to my wife, 10.5 years on, I'm still in love. Matane Fujin. I love you and I miss you. Dream of me. Until the next week we get together, everyone, as always, good night.